Once there was a king who was convinced that the good Lord above had placed into his own head all the wisdom in the world. So when he heard that there was a Kinto, a beggar, who played the bagpipe in the town square, who was reported to be wise, he told his courtiers that they needed to bring him so there could be a contest of wits to see how wise this Kinto could possibly be. So the soldiers went down and they escorted the Kinto into the palace. And he came in. He was a one-eyed man, and he walked before the king, having no idea why he was there. And the king began the contest in silence by holding up one finger. Well, quick as you please. The beggar held up two fingers. The king sat back in his chair. Thinking deeply, he said, and again, quick as a wink, the Kinto held up his fist. Well, the king sat back and looked around, took a breath, and finally nodded wisely and reached to a fruit bowl and selected an orange and handed it to the Kinto. Well, the Kinto, he took the orange and then reached in his pocket and pulled out a crust of bread and handed it to the king. The king took the bread and stood up and said, "The contest is over. This man has triumphed. Reward him richly and send him on his way." And so the Kinto was taken out of the palace and given rich gifts and food and drink. The king, meanwhile, sat pondering, and his courtiers said, "Your Majesty, please, we're uneducated compared to you. Tell us what happened." The king said, "Well, when he came in, I thought I would start with cosmology, and I said," holding up one finger, obviously, meaning there is but one God in heaven. But he responded, "Of course, yes, there is God in heaven, but his Son was sent to earth." Well, I thought this was a valid point, so I thought to broaden the discourse, and I held up three fingers, of course, meaning there is the Lord in heaven and his Son on earth and the Holy Spirit. And immediately, he put all the fingers together. And of course, that could only mean yes, but the three are one and the same. Well, I knew I could not get the better of him in speaking of spiritual matters, so I sought to change the subject, and I decided to talk geography. And I held up an orange, of course, signifying the world is round. And he held up a crust of bread. What depth of knowledge! Because, of course, his answer meant, yes, the world is round, but what use are such lofty concepts when we all know that human beings live by their daily bread, provided by all of creation? Well, I could see I was not going to prevail with such an intellect. Isn't it a mystery how one living in such a lowly station can be so wise? Meanwhile, back in the hovel where the Kinto lived, he called all of his friends and neighbors in and laid out a feast for them with some of what the king had given him. And when they asked him, "What happened? What happened?" he said, "Well, I don't quite exactly know. I was taken in before a king. I'd never seen that king before. What kind of a king he was. As soon as he saw me, he started to mock me. He held up one finger. Clearly, he was making fun of the fact that I only have one eye. Well, I held up two fingers, because I have two eyes. One of them doesn't work, but I have two. Well, he wouldn't stop mocking me. He held up three fingers. Of course he meant, between the two of us, we only have three eyes. Well, this made me mad, So I shook my fist at him. I don't take that kind of thing from anybody. Well, he sat back in his chair. I must have scared him because he wanted to make peace. So he handed me an orange. Well, I don't like to take charity from anyone, but all I had with me was a crust of bread. I gave him the crust of bread, and all I can say is they must have terrible bread up there in the palace, because he was so pleased he gave me all of these gifts that you see here. Isn't it a tremendous mystery in life that one in such a high station can be so foolish? And they all laughed and agreed and enjoyed that meal and remembered it for many a day.